So I want to give you a quick tip on determining appropriate color and contrast. Okay, color and contrast depend entirely on context. And I want to give you an example of what I mean by this. This is an older version of Gmail, but I use it because it's a great story. There's a guy that wrote an article that I took this from, and God forbid if I was able to find it and properly credit this guy. But it's brilliant. When you look at this, the entire experience of using Gmail is strictly contextual, which means there's only one reason for you to be here. Especially in this screen, okay? When you hit this screen, there's only one reason you're doing this, and that is to send an email. So, if there's only one reason for you to be here, there can really only be one call to action, and that is send. Color and contrast in this case clearly indicate what and where that call to action is located. Now, in the article I referenced, one of the interesting things that this gentleman was talking about is the fact that that symbol, that sort of weird paper airplane shape, really has no literal bearing on what we're doing. We're not sending anything through the air, okay? And there's no label, and it's not a button that says send. So why does it work? If it's so abstracted from what we're actually doing and there's no clear label, why does it work? It works because of context. And the context, again, is that there's only one reason we're here. There's only one thing, really, that we're going to do once we compose this email, and that's we're going to send it. So color and contrast in this case is entirely dependent on context, on how it's used. That has everything to do with appropriateness, with whether or not it's the right call. So how do we tell if contrast is appropriate, right? And something that's already designed? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. You take that interface, whatever it is, and you turn it to gray. You gray everything out and you see what still stands out. Now here's, again, it's a fairly older version of Gmail, but I like it because there's a lot here. There's a lot to look at. There are a lot of things that are sort of calling for our attention. But certain things stand out, okay? The compose button stands out. Red on white, again, super high contrast. The blue search bar at the top, super high contrast. The dark headlines of the messages I haven't read yet, high contrast. So what happens if we remove the color? Still works, okay? The important elements still stand out. The contrast didn't change. The order of importance, the hierarchy, the things that really stand out to me did not change. That means color is secondary. Contrast is what's really doing the work here. Here's another example. This is Fast Company. There's a lot of color here, obviously, but does contrast work? Well, if we gray it out, pretty much the same, right? Nothing changed. The order of importance of elements on the screen didn't change. Our eye didn't suddenly go somewhere else once we remove the color. And again, that's because the contrast is doing the job of focusing our attention. You can take any mobile app and do the same thing. Here's a banking app. Is the color doing the job here, or is the contrast doing the job here? Well, if we gray it out, you can see that it's a little too reliant on color, okay? The hierarchy is still there. It's not like this is suddenly unusable. It's not. But the primary actions disappear. Everything sort of blends together. There's no area where our eye goes, yeah, that's it. That's what I'm here to do. Here's another example. Very subtle app for sleep. If we gray this out, what happens? It's okay. View this goal still stands out. That button down at the bottom, the headlines sort of still stand out. So it's not bad. This Sudoku app, let's take a look at that. If we gray this out, what happens? Everything kind of runs together, right? We lose the new game and archives. The two links in the center that were really dependent on color to make them stand out just sort of disappear, okay? There's not enough contrast between them and the background. So this kind of fails. If you look at the Nike app, which unfortunately they don't make anymore, this is a great example of excellent contrast because your first thought in looking at this would be, wow, they're using color really well. Those colors really stand out. Color is not what's making this work. It's contrast. See what happens if we gray that out? The order of importance, the order of hierarchy, the order in which we look at things, the clarity of the different calls to action, the clarity of the interaction cues does not change. It doesn't diminish. It's not any less easy to use. Nothing is less obvious. All right. Contrast is doing the job here. That's appropriate contrast.